The movement started without problems. The unit had orders to advance and reach the next area before nightfall. The main road was damaged and slow, but it was still usable. According to the plan, they were supposed to stay on it and continue forward. After several hours, the situation changed. Ahead, the road became worse. Deep mud, broken ground, and destroyed sections forced the vehicles to slow down. Progress became frustrating. Time was being lost, and everyone could feel it. At a small crossroads, the column stopped. There were two possible routes. One was the main road, longer, damaged, but known. The other was a smaller side road. It looked narrower, but cleaner. From a distance, it seemed faster. The decision had to be made quickly. Scouts reported no enemy activity in the area. The side road looked empty. No movement, no smoke, no signs of fighting. It appeared safe enough. After a short discussion, the commander chose the side road. The reasoning was simple. It would save time. It would avoid the damaged sections ahead. It would allow the unit to keep moving instead of slowing down. The column turned off the main road. At first, the decision seemed correct. The side road was firm. Vehicles moved more easily. The pace increased. Soldiers relaxed slightly. The frustration from earlier began to fade. The surroundings changed as well. Trees grew closer to the road. The terrain became tighter. Visibility was reduced, but nothing appeared threatening. No shots, no warnings, no signs of the enemy. A few minutes later, the main road was already out of sight. This happened in 1944, during the advance through occupied France, in an area that had changed hands several times in recent months. Control shifted often, and information was rarely complete. The problem was not the road itself. The problem was what the unit did not know. The side road was rarely used by large formations. It was not marked as dangerous, but it was also not well observed. Previous units had avoided it, not because of enemy activity, but because it led through difficult terrain. More importantly, it led into an area that could not be easily exited. As the column moved deeper, the road narrowed further. Trees and bushes pressed close on both sides. Vehicles had to stay in line. Turning around would be difficult. Some soldiers noticed this and mentioned it quietly. But at that point, the unit had already committed to the route. Going back would take time. Stopping would slow the operation again. So they kept moving. Radio communication remained normal, but signals became weaker as the terrain changed. Messages took longer to confirm. Nothing alarming, just enough to be noticed. The side road continued to curve gently, cutting through forest and uneven ground. Visibility was poor. The front of the column could not see far ahead, and the rear could no longer see the front clearly. Still, no enemy contact. That silence reinforced the belief that the decision had been right. The unit believed they had simply chosen the faster route. What they did not realize was that this road did not lead where they thought it did. And once they were fully inside this area, turning back would no longer be a simple option. The problem became clear too late. As the column moved forward, the road narrowed even more. Vehicles were forced closer together. Trees and thick bushes blocked the view on both sides. There were no open fields, no clear lines of sight. The unit was moving blind. Progress slowed again. The pace that had felt fast only minutes earlier disappeared. Drivers had to be careful. One mistake could stop the entire column. Then the lead vehicle slowed suddenly. Ahead, the road dipped and turned sharply. The ground looked unstable. Vehicles could pass, but only one at a time. The rest of the column had to wait. Spacing tightened. Soldiers dismounted to guide vehicles through the worst sections. Others stood watch, scanning the tree line. Everything still looked quiet, but the silence felt different now, heavier. Radio checks were made. Messages went through, but not clearly. Static interrupted short reports. Orders had to be repeated. It was not a complete failure, but communication was no longer reliable. That was another warning sign. A small patrol was sent forward to check the next bend in the road. They moved carefully, staying close to cover. After a short time, they reported back. The road continued. No enemy seen. That report gave the column confidence to keep moving. The patrol did not see what was higher up the slope, deeper in the forest. From concealed positions, enemy soldiers had already noticed the column. They did not rush. They watched quietly, letting the vehicles move deeper into the narrow area. They understood the terrain better. They knew where the road became impossible to turn around. They knew where vehicles would slow down. They knew where movement would stop completely. The column reached the narrowest point. Vehicles were now packed tightly together. The front could not move faster. The rear could not pull back easily. The forest pressed in on both sides. This was not a good place to be. The first shots came without warning. Gunfire erupted from the trees. Short, controlled bursts hit the road near the middle of the column. Soldiers dropped for cover. Shouts followed as everyone tried to locate the shooters. More shots came from a different angle. The road became chaos. Vehicles stopped instantly. Drivers tried to move, but there was nowhere to go. Soldiers pressed against wheels, trees, and shallow ground depressions. Returning fire was difficult. The enemy was hidden and firing from cover. The wrong road had done exactly what the enemy needed. It had slowed the unit. It had compressed the column. It had removed any easy escape. Radio operators tried to call for support. Some messages went out. Others failed. The terrain interfered with the signal. Reports were short and urgent. Ambush. Enemy in the trees. Movement blocked. The commander tried to reorganize the unit. Orders were shouted down the line. Small groups were told to secure the sides of the road and push back the attackers. But every attempt to move into the forest met heavy resistance. The enemy did not advance. They did not need to. They controlled the situation and chose when to fire. Every movement by the column exposed someone. Wounded soldiers were pulled back where possible. Medics worked under pressure, using whatever cover they could find. The realization spread quickly. This was not bad luck. This was not a random attack. The decision at the crossroads had led them here. The wrong road had turned a routine movement into a trap. The fighting did not end quickly. The unit was stuck on the road, pressed in by trees and uneven ground. The enemy did not rush. They fired when movement started and stopped when the soldiers froze. It was controlled and patient. The commander understood the situation. Pushing forward would only expose more men. Pulling back was just as dangerous. The road was too narrow, and the column was packed too tightly. There was only one option left. The order was given to break contact and leave the road. Small groups would move into the forest, using cover and moving separately. Vehicles and heavy equipment would be abandoned if necessary. The goal was no longer to continue the mission, but to get out alive. The first group moved off the road quietly. Enemy fire followed, but not as heavy as before. The attackers adjusted, but they could not cover every direction at once. This gave the soldiers a small chance. More groups followed. Some moved successfully, disappearing into the trees. Others were forced back by gunfire and had to try a different direction. The forest was dense and confusing, but it offered cover that the road did not. Wounded soldiers were helped as best as possible. Two men supported one wounded comrade, moving slowly and carefully. When someone could not move, they were hidden and marked for later recovery. These were not easy decisions, but staying on the road was no longer an option. Gradually, the sound of gunfire began to fade, not because the enemy stopped firing, but because the unit was no longer in one place. The ambush lost its focus. The road was left behind. Later, when the area was checked again, the signs were clear. Abandoned vehicles stood silent. Equipment lay scattered. The forest showed marks of movement and hurried retreat. The enemy had not destroyed the unit completely, but they had achieved their goal. They stopped the advance. They caused losses. They forced the unit to abandon its route. All of it came back to one decision. At the crossroads, the choice had seemed small. A shorter road, a faster way forward. A simple decision to save time. But that road led into terrain that could not be controlled. It removed options. It removed visibility. And once the unit entered, it was too late to correct the mistake. Later reports would describe the event in neutral terms. They would mention terrain. They would mention enemy activity. They would mention communication issues. But the soldiers who were there remembered it differently. They remembered the moment the column turned off the main road. They remembered how quiet it felt at first. And they remembered realizing, too late, that the wrong road had decided everything.